Hi, kitty cats. President-elect Trump claims to possess the power to redefine science, that sex is the same as gender, and what he says about the two just simply goes. But politicians cannot control the universe. The purpose of science is to observe, and observations of reality will override any human wish, including Donald Trump's. So, I am Amethysta Herrick. I am an author and a podcaster. You can check the links below for more information about me and the work that I do. The first thing that you're going to see here, there was a link to Amethysta.io. That's my personal website. You will find all the social media networks that I'm on, and you can follow me there for all the updates on everything I do. Some of those updates you will find on genderidentitytoday.com, which will also come up here. All of my articles, all of my podcasts are published there, as well as work from other contributors. So if you like this content, I hope you'll consider subscribing at genderidentitytoday.com. You can get a subscription there for as low as $2 a month. So, and if you'd like to contribute to genderidentitytoday.com, like actually, put your thoughts out there to the internet, please contact me using my personal website. That was amethysta.io. And I would love to publish you. So we'll do it. And of course, the last one here, you'll see somewhere there's a link that if you'd like to leave a tip, the last link goes to coffee.com, where you can send a tip as you see fit. All right, the topic today, hubris. Hubris. What's hubris? Hubris is a literary device. It was originally used very extensively by Sophocles in Greek literature. And it implied, at least when Sophocles used it, it was actions that violate the natural order of things. Violate the natural order. Usually that implied a transgression against the gods, in this case, the Greek gods. Usually what this meant was it was mortals who placed themselves above the gods, above the will of the gods. So today, we have thought of hubris just as arrogance. In fact, there's actually a legal definition of hubris today. But I believe that it's very possible to be arrogant in your social environment without necessarily that being hubris. Because you can believe you're the best among your peers, the best within your social environment, but still be subject to the will of the gods. Now, why am I talking about hubris? I'm talking about hubris because President-elect Donald Trump gave a speech in this past week. And in this speech, there were two major statements that he made. The first was that on day one of his administration, he intends to, quote, end the transgender lunacy. Now, of course, he doesn't really actually go to explain what that lunacy is, but he did say that he will make it, and I quote, official policy of the United States that there are only two genders, male and female. End quote. Now, I'm a scientist. I studied biology. I know the definitions of sex and gender. I teach the definitions of sex and gender. In fact, I've actually taught those definitions right here on TikTok, on YouTube. Trump is discussing gender, but he uses words that describe sex. Now, I'm not going to mince words here. I do not believe that Trump is a smart man. I do not believe that Trump is a particularly educated man. Trump is most definitely not a scientist. And misusing or creating words has kind of become Trump's political trademark. But aside from that, using words that describe sex to describe gender using words that define sex to describe gender fulfills the conservative rhetoric, the idea that sex is identical to gender, the same thing. Now, I understand that, at least as a politician, whose job it is to vie for the greatest applause from the person currently directly in front of them, Trump is not stupid. He's pushing the right buttons here. In fact, I'm looking at somebody right here who's telling me the transmodern movement is hurting the rest of LGBT. Don't believe that, Jason Benjamin. Because when they come for me, when they're finished with me, they will come for you. Just telling you. Because science, ultimately, science is not a matter of public policy. Redefining terms through legislation does not change reality. Trump is placing himself above the observation of science. Trump is a poster child for hubris. Actually, Jason, if you're gonna say this, I'd love for you to stick around, Jason Benjamin. Please stick around, because this is all about what I'm talking about here. It's going to take me a little time to get there, but please, I'd love to hear your feedback after I've gone, through everything that I want to discuss today. Okay, so please stick around. So I've said Trump is a poster child for hubris. What's the foundation of this hubris? So I mentioned earlier, Trump doesn't define this transgender lunacy, just says he's going to end it, right? The conservative viewpoint is to say that they present simple biology versus social construct. That what we're looking at here, what Jason has said in terms of the transmodern movement hurting LGBT, is because politicians have turned a discussion into simple biology versus social construct. And what's interesting, they are unwittingly accurate in that assessment. They don't mean it the way they do, but they are unwittingly accurate. So I'm going to get to the simple biology part, but I want to start by talking about a social construct. Now let me acknowledge everybody here. Hi Nijo, hi Genevieve, good to see you both here. LZXT, let me see. I think action in our country has reactions that are amplified due to media and politicians' influence. So correct. And that is exactly what it is I want to talk about today. All right. I'm going to go back in this conversation. I'm going to go back to the 16th century. Think about this. The 16th century, there was a philosopher. He wasn't really a philosopher. He didn't consider himself a philosopher. But his name was Michel de Montaigne. My French is awful, sorry. But he wrote essays leading to the idea that scientific facts, are social constructs. Now I'm going to tell you where that came from. He has one line that really informed all of this, and his line is, we need to interpret interpretations more than to interpret things. And so this led to the idea, as a social environment uses a word or a phrase, it's the use itself that gives meaning to the word or phrase. And that meaning within the social environment may or may not correspond to what was actually observed. It may not correspond to the meaning of the word in other social environments. So what that means is that the social environment, in using this word, constructs the meaning. In some cases, maybe even the concept behind the meaning for the word. This is the definition of a social construct, imbuing a word or a phrase with meaning particular to the social environment that uses it. Now, and Jason, maybe this'll jump out a little bit at you. LXZT, hopefully this will say something too. Social constructs do not mean that we just get to choose whatever the hell we want. Social construct means that it's socially constructed. Social doesn't mean individual. Individual means individual. So a social construct is a majority of people who believe in a particular type of behavior. They give meaning to this word. All right. So it doesn't mean when you say, gender is a social construct, you're not saying that we can choose whatever we want to. Social norms are ultimately what end up defining gender roles. So aside from that, I'm only saying this because I'm giving both you, Jason, and LXZT a little bit of background here. So this Michel de Montaigne, I'm getting a swoon about history. Thank you, Frybird. This bit of history led to a philosophical movement in the early 1900s, and it affected a philosopher named Michel Foucault, who was Judith Butler's graduate advisor. And so certainly this idea, Michel de Montaigne, certainly affected Butler's work as well, particularly when you look at the 1991 book, Gender Trouble, that they published. But I was going on about social constructs are particular to the social environment. How does science ultimately affect humanity? Now, as a scientist, which is what I am, I will tell you scientists observe reality. scientists collect facts about reality. Our major duty is to collect and report facts as cleanly as possible. And when we see a fact that appears to contradict all of our other facts, we have a duty to go after that. In fact, it may even inspire a new field of study, which is sort of fascinating, right? We observed in physics, Newtonian mechanics breaks down at a certain size. And so that led into quantum mechanics. So this is what scientists do. We observe reality. Unfortunately, collections of facts aren't generally very useful on their own. And so we use statistics. And I was an analytical chemist, so statistics was kind of my shebang. We use statistics to interpret these collections of facts. And sometimes using statistics, we can find certain trends. Sometimes it allows us to reject certain data because we maybe didn't take it cleanly or report it cleanly. But it also allows us to develop theories. And a valid theory is one that can account for all the facts. Now notice I said valid, not necessarily true, because a valid theory is to say, well, the river flows downhill because the goddess of the river wants to go that way. It's a valid theory. It accounts for the data. It's not necessarily true. So, valid theories. Politics, however, politics will use statistics. And to use Michel de Montaigne's phraseology, interpretations to create public policy. It's not necessarily the collection of facts that they use. They use an interpretation of the facts. And interpretations always come from the viewpoint of the interpreter. Because if you look at history, just to throw out a bit more history, you will find that science, well, let me put that in quotes, science has been used to justify racism, to justify sexism, to justify imperialism, pretty much every discrimination ever in human history, at least once we started talking in terms of science has been used to justify that against science. So Trump's attempt, President-elect Trump, his attempt to redefine gender as the words male and female is exactly this. It's a weak interpretation of facts, observations of reality by a particular social environment. The social environment I'm talking about is the set of conservatives unwilling to entertain the notion that anybody could be different from them. Trump's attempt to redefine gender is an attempt to use scientific terms in a way a social environment wishes they were defined. Not the way they are defined, but as the social environment wishes they were defined. It's an attempt to give a different meaning to existing words within the social environment of the United States, ultimately as legislation. And if you were paying attention even 5 minutes ago, you'll remember we have a phrase to describe giving meaning to words within a social environment, and that phrase is called social construct. Conservative anti-transgender rhetoric is nothing more than another social construct. And that's why it's so easy to say things like, I can attack what Trump is saying here. This is why it's so easy for me to say things like, you can wish away intersex people, but that doesn't mean they go away. And all of your wishes to change observations in reality won't make it happen. They level those accusations at me. You can wish you were a girl, but you aren't because of basic science. We're talking about social constructs here. So it's funny that we should get to this point, that I should say exactly what we're talking about here is a social construct. Judith Butler called gender, of course, a social construct more than 30 years ago now. And what we're looking at here with Trump is nothing more than another social construct. So let me check comments really quickly. All right. Hopefully LXZT, I've talked at least a little bit about politicians and the media. History, the right to marry and love who you want are rights. I think I would say, I'm not going to go into that. I don't want to talk about rights because there's a different meaning, I think, for everybody on what a right means. So, all right. Can conservatives what? Perhaps you're a conservative. Can conservatives redefine science. Ooh, dang. Yeah, the TikTok thing says Trump's hubris. Can conservative... Oh, well. Politicians are statisticians. Yeah, it doesn't align with YouTube. It's a bummer. So let's see. Assigned birth. That's political speak, is what Jason Benjamin says. I want to return to that, okay? Cisgender is political speak. I want to return to that, okay? And I swear I will. I swear I will. So Carrie Berry says gender is a social construct. I hope you're going to stick around, Will, for a moment. So Jason observed at birth, maybe. Give me a moment. Go into YouTube here. Michaela says, listening intently to this, it is really interesting. I may learn something. Well, I hope so. Nijo says, I think slang words can be a good example of socially constructed words with meaning or whatever. The same slang word can mean different things in different places. Yes, exactly. Kim Kardashian, ended up using the word literally to mean figuratively, to mean exceptionally figuratively, which is its diametric opposite. Somewhat funny, huh? Love that. All right. If conservative anti-transgender rhetoric is only another social construct, then what's the real science of sex and gender? Well, here we go. Will A says, I've already said political movements can co-opt science, so it's not out of the question. Oh, absolutely, for what it's worth. Because politicians are the ones who are going to define legislation. My point in talking about any of this is to say that we need to hold politicians to real facts. So I had mentioned before that conservatives love to say sex and gender is just simple biology. So I'm going to go through that. Here is the process used by biologists long ago to define the word sex. I'm not even going to discuss the complexities of inherent in genetics because the definitions of both words, sex and gender, are divorced from genetics. Divorced from biochemistry, divorced from anatomy. In fact, the definitions are divorced from the definition of a species. Sex and gender, these two words, are not about humans. Sex and gender ultimately are the lives necessary to be lived in order for species to reproduce. So here we go. Take your Wayback Machine and imagine early biologists. Early biologists needed to classify species. This was their purpose. Biology is the study of life. And biologists observed living things so that they could develop theories about life. And initially, biologists, in looking around, separated nature first into things that appeared alive and things that appeared not alive. And so they made a definition based on observation. Alive meant observing certain behavioral patterns, such as the ability to metabolize, the ability to grow, the ability to respond to stimulus from an environment, and conceivably adapt to said stimulus, and then also the ability to reproduce. Now, since reproduction appeared to be a primary characteristic of things that are alive, then they moved on to observe reproduction. And they separated things that could reproduce into two broad categories. There were things that reproduced with only a single parent and things that required at least two parents to reproduce. And they made another definition that single parents, parents that can reproduce with only one parent, species that can reproduce with only one parent, reproduced in an asexual manner, and species that required at least two parents reproduced in a sexual manner. I'm going to move on just to sexual reproduction. Hopefully you're okay with that. Biologists, now that they've observed this, and now that they've defined this, had to ask the question, why does it take at least two parents to reproduce? And they observed, ultimately, through observation, they observed that sexual reproduction takes place through what they called gametes. I'm not going to say that much about gametes, other than they are packages of something. Today we know it as packages of genetic material, but at the time it was just packages of something that combined in order to create offspring. Biologists recognize that each gamete alone is insufficient to create offspring. There must be a combination of at least two. I'm saying at least two. Biologists observed that most species created only two types of packages, two types of gametes. This isn't universal across biology. There are some species that have more than 2 gametes, but for our purposes, I'm going to limit these observations of species that make only 2 gametes. And that's because humans appear in this category. So they made definitions, again, based on observation, to describe the 2 gametes. There was one that appeared relatively small and motile, able to move, and those gametes were defined as sperm. And then there were gametes that appeared relatively large and didn't move. They were stationary. They defined these gametes as ova, ovum in the singular. So they made definitions to describe the organisms that create these 2 gametes. Organisms that create sperm were defined as male, and organisms that create ova were defined as female. Now that's it. There you go. There's the definition of sex. Male and female, the definition of sex. You're going to notice several missing aspects from this definition. And hopefully, this is actually going to address some of the comments that are popping up here in the TikTok comments. Several missing aspects from this definition. There is no mention of how the gametes work. There's no mention of genetics involved in the definition of sex. There is no mention of how the gametes are produced, which is to say that no recognition of biochemistry is involved in the definition of sex. There is no mention of how the gametes are delivered in order to be recombined. So there's no mention of anatomy involved. You may notice, ultimately, there's not even any mention of species whatsoever. Now maybe you're going to say, what's the value in this definition? Because biology is more than abstractions. Very, very true. And that's what biologists recognize. They recognize this theory of reproduction is insufficient. Now I'm going to address some of these comments, I swear, but what I'd rather do is go through the process biologists used to define gender. Because I can already see Kevin Nos X9 is like, I hope you're going to get to this. Yeah. So biologists, after creating all of these definitions, sought to apply them to all living species. Can all organisms be assigned a designation of sex? Can all organisms be classified just into male and female? An observation of individuals within a species, they found there were species that correspond perfectly to it. Yeah, no problem. They also found species in which all individuals can create both gametes. Plants fall into this category. Many plants fall into this category. They also found species in which individual organisms can create one gamete early in life and then switch to the other gamete later in life. This is a phenomenon called sequential hermaphrodism. They found species, humans are one of them, unable to create any gametes at birth. They must wait until later in life. They have to reach what they called sexual maturity. And biologists also found individuals in all species that failed to produce any gametes whatsoever. They gave those the name sterile. And finally, interestingly enough, they found species in which individuals can create either gamete, but do so based on social pressures. And if you've watched any of my stuff for a while, you'll notice that I love to use fish. There are a couple of species in fish, and the Great Barrier Reef as a demonstration. So biologists were stuck in a place here. What do biologists do in this place? But you'll notice I changed my terminology. I wasn't talking about species. I was talking about individuals within a species. Species may still be classified as creating only 2 gametes. They can be classified as having only 2 sexes. But individuals within the species express those characteristics of sex based on other characteristics, based on their individual genetics and biochemistry, their individual situation in life, which could be age, it could be whether or not you had an accident, their individual situation within a social environment. So biologists needed to take the abstraction of sex as a characteristic of a species and make it individual. The word sex was clearly insufficient to cover all aspects of biology, and so they defined a new word, and that was gender, which is the combination of individual genetics, individual life situation, and individual social environment that result in the expression of the species' sex characteristics. And there you go. There's a definition of gender. I'm going to jump through some of these comments now because you've been so patient listening to me. Thank you. Hog Roast Lynn has said, if anatomy doesn't define gender, how does getting surgery affirm it? Well, I think I also said anatomy doesn't define sex. But gender certainly has a component of physicality to it, which is one of the things that I said. So if you change your anatomy, couldn't that conceivably affirm gender? I guess go back and think about that, Hog Roast Lynn. Not exactly a tough question to answer. Give me something a little better. So, all right, let's see. What do we got here? Jason Benjamin now asks, how does a man who says he is a woman prove he is a woman? Think about it. Well, so sex, the terms of sex are male and female, dependent upon what gametes you produce. The terms, at least in humanity, or at least in humans, for gender are man and woman. And you can look at many other species. Ask yourself why we have stag and doe, why we have stud and, I'm forgetting, stud and cow. Why do we have these words? We have these words because they describe gender. They don't describe sex. And we've known that because there are some studs that get gelded. And now these are called geldings. Cows are still cows, but you can have a stud that might be a gelding because it's a different life situation. This is why we have this. Does a man who says he is a woman have to prove he is a woman? I guess. I mean, what's the proof that you're looking for? Can you prove you have a certain sex? Can you prove you have a certain gender? It's a good question, but Jason says we have different hormones, brains, lungs, muscles, chromosomes. Yes, each of us has an individual component. Those individual components are what define gender. Vocal cords, Adam's apple. Religious people believe things, but we are not forced to believe. I don't think I'm going to agree with that. There are dogmas inherent in some religions. There are certainly dogmas inherent in some political parties, and you are forced to believe. Let's see. So Jason says there's no action or noise to get them to understand. True. People have known two sexes for humans for hundreds of thousands of years. Sex is something defined by biologists. If you go back to the Proto-Indo-European word from which we think gender originates, it actually has to do with a family circle. It has to do with an identity, not something scientific. Humans have known that it takes two humans to reproduce. And they've noticed that it really takes, insertion of a penis into a vagina, admittedly. But they did not characterize people necessarily by anatomy. If you look at history, again, I'm going to go back into history here. If you look at history, people who lived outside the sexuality and gender norms were considered oracles. There are stories that go back much farther than even biblical stories. Even the Pentateuch, originally traditionally attributed to Moses. So what else do we do? We got, so gender identity is individual and unique to each person in a way. Carrie Berry says this. Is gender identity individual and unique? Yes. When people have asked me the question, how many genders are there? I love to answer by saying just one. Yours. Because I don't have the same gender identity you do. You have different genetics. You have different life situation. You have a different social environment. There you go. Jason Benjamin says people don't speak gametes. Quite right. I'm about to get there. Gonna get there. Let me see. Eunuchs were in the Bible repeatedly. Very true. Gelded, yes. Biologists improve there are men and women. They study them. So biologists can only observe. That's what science does. Biologists made definitions. And I'm using false convoluted logic. No, actually what I'm doing is just given the process that biologists went through. You can call it false and convoluted. I'm fine with that. You know what? The thing is that it's false convoluted logic To assume that something is very, very simple, and then when somebody goes, well, here's how simple it is, to go, oh my gosh, that's a little too easy. That's false and convoluted. So, hi, CM Burns. All right, here we go. Brittany says, it would have sent a horrible message to our children if we elected a president who wasn't found liable for sexual abuse and business fraud in court. It would have, wouldn't it? I'm glad we didn't do that, huh? All right. So, Jason, let's hope that this starts plowing through some of the concerns you still have. The difference between sex and gender, as defined by biology. Sex is an abstraction. Sex pertains only to a species. Gender is a combination of personal implementations. Gender pertains only to an individual. Individual biology, individual social environment. And this is interesting. Biology, you go the study of life. It's only about biology, right? But biologists, in creating another word, recognized existence is more than life. Life is more than reproduction. Sex and gender were never the same, were never meant to be the same, and never will be the same. And this isn't because conservatives are necessarily morally or ethically wrong. This is because nature just operates in this way. So conservatives are scientifically wrong. The conservative social construct ignores the contributions of science to ease the discomfort of some people. Nature doesn't care about people. These observations can't be observed because of some people. I give this a word. I call this phenomenon unobserving. Conveniently and selectively excluding empirical data to fit your desires. And this will always lead to an invalid theory. And you may recall I said at the beginning, a theory needs to explain all data. So that theory fails. Jason Benjamin is now telling me that definition of gender is brand new and invented for political purposes. It's not science. Well, that's untrue. The first place I saw it laid out, at least as explicitly as I just did, was in Joan Roughgarden's. She's a professor, I believe, at University of Berkeley. I'm trying to remember, UC Berkeley. Maybe it wasn't Berkeley, but Joan Roughgarden's book, which I believe was originally published in 2003. So, 21, it's at least old enough to drink. So I guess, go for that. All right, unobserving. If what you want to do, Jason Benjamin, is unobserve what I have because it doesn't fit your desires, you're unobserving. And I'm sorry to see that because that's what we're doing in the United States today. Nijo asks, is the United States really governed by a democracy? Or is it an idiocracy? Well, technically what we have is a democratic republic. So it's not governed by a democracy. Certainly could be an idiocracy because, what the hell. All right, well, JPG says, I guess the doctor with a Ph.D. is absolutely wrong. I mean, it's on your birth certificate. So somebody, just because somebody wrote something, first of all, the doctor who delivered me was an MD. Conceivably, you don't know the difference between an MD and a Ph.D., but just because I wrote something down doesn't make it right. You typing that out doesn't actually change science. So live it up there or whatever you want. Jason now asks the question, how do we know the difference between a feminine man and a trans woman? There's a really easy way to find out, I suppose. You could ask. What pronouns do you use? What's your gender identity? I mean, did you consider that? Did you consider that sociology may actually not entail defining every single sorry, I'm going off on a tangent while I was thinking of something else. Did you ever consider that science may not define every single aspect of humanity, the human experience? There's some sociology involved in that there. So you just talk to these people. How do you know the difference? Here's another question. That's not scientific, you ask. You don't ask in science. You're right, you don't ask in science. What you do is you observe. Do you know how you observe? Oftentimes you just look. Jason, you're trying to, no, and the proof I'm speaking philosophy is now a giant. Jason Benjamin 7 has said, that's the proof you are speaking philosophy. There are two things. No. Jason, there are two things here. One of them has to do with definitions. What science does is create definitions. Science observes and develops theories. All right? The theory has to explain all data. The theory of sex that I just described explains all data. The theory of gender I just described explains all data. Is that philosophy? No, that is pure science. What you're talking about is you don't like what I've said. And that's fine. You don't like what I've said. Don't like it. It's not the point. What you don't like doesn't make the definition from scientists any less correct. Definitions are not politics. Definitions are definitions based on observations of reality. All right, let me see. GBQ says, thanks for responding, but why has it been either a boy or a girl for thousands of years? I think I did answer that. Boy or girl, those are two words used for gender. So, yeah, thousands of years ago we said, looks like a boy, looks like a girl. And if they acted differently, oftentimes they were considered oracles. They were considered special. All right, I'm going to move on here. So Jason Benjamin has said, no, you said only way to prove is an opinion. Bro, the way to prove something is to observe it in reality. When you make an observation in reality, that's one thing. We are talking about social environments. So there you go. All right. I'm going to bring this to an end. Hubris, because I started off talking about Trump's hubris. Hubris has a counterpart in Greek literature, and it was called catharsis. And so after maybe you've known this, because, everybody read Sophocles here, right? I'm sure Jason Benjamin has it on his shelf right now. After you've put yourself above the gods, you get this rude awakening, and generally everything just goes to hell the way the gods intended for it to happen anyway. Catharsis is that feeling of remorse or regret for having overstepped the boundaries set by the gods, set by the fates. Are we gonna... That's not Jung. Oh, okay, so sorry, you've read them, Jason. Good, cool. Will we ever see Trump's catharsis? I'm going to suspect the answer is no. Politics has now become a battle to be perceived as right, not the concern with doing what is right. I'm going to return to that original thing that I said at the beginning, that it was an unwittingly accurate statement. But basic biology, simple biology versus social construct. What conservatives have said is certainly not basic science. Even scientists, for what it's worth, are publishing work these days to attempt to redefine sex, to be more like gender and meaning. They're trying to use individual gender, individual genetics as an aspect of redefining sex. And it's exactly for what you're trying to say, Jason. They go, well, oh gosh, well, what we can do is we can just see if we can get particular genes, if we can get other characteristics, if we turn this into anatomy, if we look at genetic drift, if we look at, how humanity has changed from 500,000 years ago to today. But there's no need for it, because humans are not the only things that are in nature. Those definitions that I gave you, you're asking about humans, but humans are not the only part of nature. And nature doesn't give much of a crap, for what it's worth, about humans. So what can we do? What do we do? I told you I was going to bring this together. We can educate ourselves. All right? We can educate others. And when we've done this, we must vote for people who are educated. Now, next week, I plan to pull the two parts that I just gave there, the process parts, into a separate video. I'll make a post about that on my YouTube community page, so if you want to, check there. But I hope we can all use this video to make the world ultimately a better place. I'm going to say this directly. We are not subjects of the government. All of us, including the government, including President-elect Trump, are subjects to the observations of nature. That's kind of all there is to it. That's all I had to say on the topic today. I'll entertain questions about anything else I discussed. So let me plow through some of these comments again. First, I'm going to go back to YouTube. So it says, Nijo says, like the IS people that get, oh yes, okay, got it. Sorry, I had to read this for context. Intersex people get an M or an F, but genetic testing might say otherwise. Very true. We are, Jason, who looks like he got booted, we are assigned a sex at birth. There's really no good use for it. And when we continue to ask questions, well, how do we prove? How do we make sure that somebody is male or female? What do you do in the case of intersex? I mean, there's no answer to that. What you do is you observe, you ask for behavior. Sometimes science, believe it or not, I know this is going to sound like heresy from a scientist, sometimes science doesn't have a clear answer because it can't. It's just the way it works. So intersex people will get an M or an F, but genetic testing say otherwise. Very good point, Nijo. And the point is just that we get assigned these things and they're supposed to be, valuable, but ask yourself what it gives you. Like when I pull out my driver's license, does it make a difference if I was doing like 120 miles an hour down a residential street? Does it make a difference whether I'm male or female? Not really. Just give me a ticket and, let me move on. Or, whatever. Take me to jail at that point because there you go. All right. Frybird has said, not everything occurs in a lab. Very true. Reality is much different from collections of facts that we observe. There you go. All right, let me see. Trust the science, got it. No opinions here. Oh, thank you, CM Burns. No opinions here. Carrie Berry, I love you too. Matt, don't worry about being late. Everything's cool. Jason's a slow learner. I like this. Nature doesn't really GAF about humans. One of the things that I had a whole section, and you'll notice I'm already at 1:42. Okay, I'm 42 minutes into this. I had a whole section that I ended up ditching. JBL 1970 says, I'm boringly wrong. Oh, okay. So I'll come to your live and you prove me wrong there, buddy. Let's see what happens. It'll be fun. Anyway, doesn't GAF about humans. I had a whole section in here, Carrie, about how we got here. Because I think we get here at because we want to put humanity above the rest of nature, or because we do, I should say. And the funny thing is, I started off by saying Trump puts himself above the will of the gods, right? If we were to abstract that and say, well, the will of the gods, okay, we're not in Greek society anymore. We know that there are some scientific principles, etc. The will of the gods is nature, like we would think of it today just as nature, right? So nature doesn't GAF about humans. We want to place humans outside of nature. And you can see this going as far back. I mean, I've said this before. When in the early Renaissance, scientists were still frightened that they were going to get burned at the stake for heresy, for being scientists. You're not going to go against that. And interestingly, I mean, we were in the 1800s when Charles Darwin published his first book about the origin of the species. His book, I'll say that again. His book, The Origin of the Species. Darwin went on to coin, ultimately what we call social Darwinism, which is to say that males are necessarily aggressive, females are necessarily submissive, and he used this to try to justify at least Victorian excesses and Victorian sexism, ultimately Victorian racism, imperialism, all of these things. But he was very, very careful not to say that humans are subject to actual genetic, biological evolution, because humans are outside of nature, right? Humans are God's creatures, the Christian God's creatures. So nature doesn't give a fuck about humans. And I had a whole section about that I ended up cutting just because it was like, I could go into this, but because a thought that I had when Trump says, hey, it will be national policy that there are two genders, male or female, really what you're looking at here are not the words of a president. You're looking at the words of a pope. You're looking at a person who doesn't want to prove anything. You're looking at somebody who wants to say, I'm just right, you're wrong, and if you don't like it, I'm just going to legislate you out of existence. That's a pope. That's somebody who writes a liturgy. So anyway, thank you, Carrie. That was an exceptional comment. I love that. Let me look at these other ones. Democracy, IS, Miss Schiff. I hope that's right. It says, hey, kitty cats. Hey. Oh, God. Oh, I forget. I'm wearing the shirt there. There's my... This is my own little merchandise here. I got to crack myself up. Shop.amethysta.io if you're... And it says something on the back. It says, I don't know if you can see it. It says, talk soon. It's got, as I'm coming in the door, you can see I say, hi, kitty cats. As I'm walking out the door, you can see I say, talk soon. I crack myself up, but there you go. All right. Nijo says, I like the people that try to fight back with more than just saying, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. I tend to like those people better, too, because it's like, well, okay, I'm wrong. Can you tell me how? Can you tell me why? All right. It's the ones that at least try to come up with arguments and reasons that at least show they're trying to use some brain power. Yeah. I do believe, though, that we can reach all people, because I think it's really clear that we have this antagonistic relationship. All of us have there's a really huge antagonism in our political system and the entire political climate. How about if I just say that? And the antagonism is exhausting. I think it's exhausting. Everybody feels this exhaustion. I mean, we got to November 6th, and I think everybody went, oh, goddess, thank you, whatever you're saying. I said, oh, good goddess, thank you for this being over. I'm not happy with the results, but oh my gosh, I'm so glad I don't have to worry about it anymore. In fact, I started driving through the neighborhood, and I was like, I'm going to go kick over that political sign. I didn't even care who it was. Right? I'm like, look, cut it out. We're all exhausted. And so I think that we can actually reach these people by saying, listen, I have a way to address your exhaustion. The thing is, don't play into these politics. The conservatives are trying to create a new social construct. I believe liberals have not done much better. I'm certainly not trying to say that liberals have done much better, because we lean into basically that antagonism, basic biology versus social construct. And the point is that existence is both. Existence is both biology and sociology. The human experience has to do with our bodies, where our bodies are, how old our bodies are, and the social environment in which we try to use our bodies. Speaking of using our bodies, my body, my choice, right? All right. I'm going to look some more here, so I'm fine with anyone asking questions. Ooh, yeah. Freiberg. Oh, so Matt says his statements were about me. Ooh. Anyway, Jason got booted. That was the point. Never be accepted by society. Oh, gosh. Freiberg says Trump is displaying symptoms of mental illness, sadly. Yeah. I wish there was, I wish we could, I'm going to go off, on this big, huge, has nothing to do with anything sort of tangent. Because Nijo asked, do we live in a democracy? Are we governed by a democracy? No, we're governed by a democratic republic, and that means that we are limited to the people who will choose to become representatives. And there's a lot of, gosh, I wish I could remember. There was a management person. I do not remember who it was. Possibly Peter Drucker, but that said that usually the people who want to manage something are the ones you don't want managing it. And that has been, said by several people. There's a Navy SEAL as well. I'm trying to remember that guy's name, but there was a Navy SEAL who said those who want to be leaders generally aren't qualified to be them. So, yeah, I wish we had representatives who would represent us. But we don't. Well, we have our representatives who go, well, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to say that my version of things is right. So we're not looking to do right. We're looking to be right. And unfortunately, I think that's really indicative of where we are today. I mean, it's really comic because actually, just to bring Jason Benjamin back into this, poor kid's not able to see this, I think, maybe. But 1,000 years ago, well, it's more than that, early human history is characterized by tribalism. You had tribes that would fight each other, oftentimes because, they had different gods. And so they said, well, your God sucks. Your God sucks. I'm going to come after you because my God's better. What are we doing now? I mean, if we have two scientifically inaccurate points that are being espoused by our representatives, what else are we doing? All we can do is go, well, your point sucks. We'll prove it. Well, your point sucks. That's how I proved it. So we're back in the same place. And the irony, like I said, I wanted to bring Jason back into this. The irony is that what he wants to do is say, well, now we know everything with science. But we don't. Science actually doesn't know everything. Science possibly can't know everything. I'm not really sure how much of a hill I would die on, or how much of a hill that would be that I would die on, however you say that. But while we have science, and science is a collection of facts, how we interpret those facts and throw them into legislation doesn't include everything we know about the human existence. And I think that's why we're facing this right now. This is why we're having this conversation. This is why Nijo asks, are we really governed by a democracy or an idiocracy? Is because we have people or representatives incapable of making some of these decisions. Truly incapable of making some of these decisions. So let me see what we got. I'm going over to TikTok comments here. Oh gosh. So Matt Adland says, the politics today is people demanding they get their way, even as reality refuses to bend to their wants. Yeah, this is what we're looking at today. And, like if you were to say, well, we could say 10,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago, when civilization supposedly began because we stopped hunting and gathering and started planting things. Like we can say, 30,000 years ago, yeah, it's the kind of dopey stuff we did. But it's not the dopey stuff we did. It continues to be the dopey stuff we're doing. And this is why we need to have some education. We need to vote for the people who are truly educated. All right. E855445 says, I wish you had a Discord. I don't know if that's addressed to me. Believe it or not, I had a Discord and I'm in the process of shutting it down. I feel kind of badly about that, but I just don't have the time to do that. However, E855445, if you search for Amethysta, like I'm on it. I'm on Discord. I love Discord. I just don't have time to manage a server at the moment. So, all right. So Frybird brings back up Trump and his mental health bits. Frybird says she cannot diagnose him, but she works in mental health and recognizes the signs. There are a lot of things that Donald Trump has said and done that I just kind of go, I feel badly for the guy. And I said right at the very beginning of this, and I pulled the quote. Let me actually see if I can get back to it. I pulled the quote from a guy. Where is this? Here we go. There was a conversation I read recently. It was really just a transcript. I didn't hear it. But the guy says that what Trump is exceptional at doing, exceptional at doing, is vying for the greatest applause from the person currently directly in front of him. Now, I've paraphrased that. But his point was What he does is push the right buttons depending upon his social environment. Pretty cool, isn't it? Pretty cool that I could turn it into that. He goes into social environments and he ingratiates himself. That's the point for Donald Trump. And he does great at it. He's really good at going in there and saying the right things to the right people, or at the very least he has speechwriters very capable of helping him do that. But you know, that's the thing that makes me feel badly, I guess, about Donald Trump, is that he's a chameleon. He goes into places, he doesn't say anything that the people don't want to hear. Does he truly believe them? I'm not sure. He had a conversation with Time magazine where he said, ooh, the transgender issue, the bathroom issue, I don't want to touch it. That's for smarter people than I am. And it's tearing our country apart. Yeah, no joke. You're not watching it being torn apart, you're doing it. What are you talking about? So E855445, it would be cool to chat. I would love for you to chat. You know, again, you can hit me up personally. I love doing these lives. I have trouble answering all my email. I have trouble answering all of the comments that I get sometimes. I'm trying to make a lot of content, and maybe what I should do is make less content and then respond to people a little bit better. Maybe that's a question. Should I do that? I don't know. I'd love for somebody to tell me, but all right. What do we got? Forget about Discord. I mean, we can get into servers, Matt. All right. So yeah, Frybird, Trump doesn't commit to any one answer. So true. Because I think he just wants to go into places and have people go, woohoo, love you, woohoo. What do you say? I don't even know. Woohoo. He said something that made me happy. Let's vote for him because he's a dummy. Love him. All right, here we go. Nijo says the irony is that throughout the tens of thousands of years of human history, nothing has changed. Yeah, to a certain extent, truth. From sticks and stones to guns and bombs, and we have less freedoms now than ever. Less freedoms. I guess I'm unsure. At this point, we can appeal to a justice system, right? If you have less freedom, you know, if your freedoms are abridged, what's the word I'm looking for? Abrogated. Your freedoms are abrogated. We have a justice system, at least in the U.S., to which we can appeal. The justice system, I can't say a whole lot about this, but not next week, but the week after. So the week of January 6th, I will be in New York, providing expert witness testimony at a trial that I think is all based on hate and discrimination against just the transgender experience, period. Do we have less freedoms? Well, we have at least the freedom to get to the justice system, and then the justice system, we have to make sure that that works appropriately as well. You're right. Human hubris and human ambition has not changed. Or some humans' desires to dominate other humans has not changed. And I find that disappointing. And at the same time, it means that I've still got things to do, right? I'm never going to run out of content. I don't know if that's good or bad. I guess that's probably bad. All right. I am looking at a clock that says 1:59. This was a lively live. There you go. I want to recognize both Frybird and Matt Adland for your moderation, all of your moderation in TikTok, the TikTok comments. I absolutely adore the two of you. I hope you know. Everybody who's watching on YouTube, everybody who's watching on Twitch. I think there's two of you. If I saw that, I think there's two. Thank you so much. It is all of your support that keeps me doing these things, that keeps me remembering why this sort of thing is important. So thank you, Nijo. Thank you, Miss Sheaf. I'm going to go with Sheaf. Brittany, thank you. Hog Roast Lynn, you asked a good question. Thank you. Kevin NoSex9, I certainly hope you got what you needed. Genevieve, Michaela, thank you everybody so much. Love all of you. I'll give you the the cute little thing again. And I will talk to you next week. Thank you.